They say the hardest battles aren't fought on distant lands, not in deserts, not across borders, but right here, inside the human heart. This is the story of Hana Sato, a Japanese woman who learned that sometimes love is stronger than any war you fight inside yourself. It's a story about breaking the chains of the past and finally choosing to heal. Hana grew up in a quiet village, nestled just outside Kyoto. It was a place where the bamboo trees danced as if they knew ancient secrets, and the rivers whispered old songs. But inside Hana, a storm was always brewing. Her father was a soldier, a man who left home wrapped in honor and returned shrouded in silence. He never spoke about what he'd seen. He never smiled. He carried a war in his eyes that he could never, ever put down. Every time Hana looked at him, she felt like she was looking at a man who had lost far more than just battles. He had lost a piece of himself, a piece he could never get back. Watching him live in that quiet agony, she made a solemn promise to herself. I will never love someone who carries war in their heart. But as we all know, life has a strange and often ironic sense of humor. When she turned 26, Hana moved to the bustling city of Kyoto, leaving her quiet village behind. She found a job in a small, traditional tea house near the famous Kion district, a place where lanterns cast a warm, golden glow on the cobblestone streets. It was there that she met Takeshi. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a fighter in the way her father had been, but Hana saw it immediately. He carried a quiet war in his own heart. His mother had passed away when he was young, and his childhood had been rough, filled with struggles he rarely spoke of. And even though he laughed easily with everyone around him, deep inside, he wrestled with a profound feeling of not being enough. Hana saw it in the flicker of his eyes, the slight hesitation in his smile. It wasn't weakness she saw, but a familiar kind of pain, a pain that resonated with the silence she grew up with. Sometimes, the heart recognizes what the mind is desperately trying to ignore. It sees a reflection of its own hidden scars in another person, and a connection is formed before a single word is even spoken. As Hana and Takeshi grew closer, a deep-seated fear began to creep into Hana's heart. Takeshi was gentle, kind, and he made her feel seen in a way no one ever had. But he was also broken, carrying his own invisible wounds. She saw echoes of her father's story in his quiet moments of sadness, and she didn't want a repeat of that life. She didn't want to spend her years watching another man she loved fight a battle she could unhelp him win. So, she did the only thing she thought would protect her. She pushed him away. She stopped replying to his messages. She didn't show up for their planned meetings. She didn't even offer an explanation. She just vanished from his life, creating a wall of silence. In her mind, she was protecting herself from inevitable heartbreak. But in reality, she was fighting herself. You can't build a future if you're letting your past keep running your heart. One rainy night, the kind of heavy downpour that feels like it's trying to wash the whole world clean, Takeshi showed up at the tea house just as she was closing. He stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his expression a mix of confusion and hurt. He looked straight at her, his voice steady but filled with emotion, and asked, "Why are you at war with someone who only wants to love you?" Those words hit Hana harder than anything she'd ever heard in her life. They weren't an accusation. They were a mirror, reflecting a truth she had refused to see. That night, Hana went home and finally let herself cry. She cried, not because of Takeshi, but because she realized she had been living just like her father, carrying a war she didn't even fight. She had inherited his fear, his silence, his emotional armor, without ever stepping on a battlefield. Her grandmother's words, long forgotten, came back to her with piercing clarity. She remembered her grandmother telling her as a child, "Everybody has two wolves inside them. One is love, and one is fear. The one you feed is the one that wins." For her entire life, Hana had been feeding fear. She fed it with her assumptions, her avoidance, and her belief that love and pain were one and the same. But for the very first time, standing there in her small apartment with tears streaming down her face, she decided to choose love. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because she finally understood a fundamental truth. You can't hate yourself into peace. You have to love yourself into healing. The very next morning, Hana walked to Takeshi's apartment. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if he would even open the door, if she had pushed him too far away. But Edith, standing there in his doorway, she told him everything. She spoke of her childhood fears, of the heavy silence that filled her home, of Erfater's haunted eyes, and the war she had been carrying all by herself. Takeshi didn't say a word. He just listened, and when she finished, her voice trembling, he simply pulled her into his arms and held her. In that embrace, for the first time in her life, Hana felt completely and utterly safe, not because someone had come to save her, but because she had finally stopped fighting herself. She had chosen to be vulnerable, to be honest, and in doing so, she had set herself free. From that day forward, they began a new journey together. They traveled across Japan, exploring misty mountains and serene coastlines. They healed, not by erasing their pasts, but by helping each other carry their burdens. They built something soft, gentle, and real. Their relationship wasn't perfect. It wasn't without struggles or difficult days, but it was rooted in a conscious choice, the choice of love over fear. Through this process, Hana began to see her father in a new light. She realized he wasn't broken. He was just hurt. He was a man who had carried an unimaginable weight alone, and instead of feeling angry at him for the silence, she finally found it in her heart to forgive him. One quiet evening, she visited his grave. As the sun set, she whispered to the cool stone, "I finally understand you, Papa. I choose love for both of us." As if in reply, a small, gentle wind brushed against her cheek. And in that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace. Hana Sato was never a soldier. She never stepped foot on a physical battlefield, but she won a war that millions of people lose every single day, the war inside the heart. She learned one of life's most powerful truths. You can't hate yourself into change. You can't criticize yourself into becoming a better person. You have to stop fighting yourself and start loving yourself. Love is how healing begins. Love is how greatness begins. If Hana could find the courage to choose love over a lifetime of fear, maybe you can too. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more.